Lovely. I think that's us good to go. Right. Yeah. Obviously, I'm sure we'll have more people trickling through, but yeah, thank you guys who are here so far. And like I said, I'm sure we'll have plenty more joining. And thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. Pippa and I, obviously keen to keep this group going, and it's great to have everyone here. So to get things started, we've got two fantastic speakers to get things kicked off, in the form of Sarah Turner, the head of business intelligence and insight delivery, and Richard Clayton, the head of data and data science, both at the National Trust, who have got a presentation to kick us off.
Cheers, Alex. You're right, just to put up, Sarah. Thank you. Slowly loading. Hi, everyone. As Alex said, my name is Richard Clayton. I work for the National Trust. I'm the head of data and data science. You can see around me that I'm presenting from one of our stately homes today. Sarah, do you want to give a quick hello as well?
Oh, hi. Yeah, I'm Sarah Turner, head of business intelligence, insight delivery.
Thanks, Sarah. And what we were going to talk about for the next 20 minutes or so, recognising, actually looking from the attendee list, that some of you either do or did work for the National Trust, what we've been doing with Tableau and improving kind of access to data to get more insight to better inform evidence-based decisions over the last couple of years. So without further ado, let's go on to the next slide. I'm sure many of you know about the National Trust, but just in case you're not a member, we're a conservation charity, 125 years old this year. Not quite the birthday year we anticipated, but nevertheless, we maintain and operate and conserve over 500 different historic places, loads and loads of land, lots of coastline. We maintain 1 million collections and pieces of art, and we've got a large customer base as well. So about 5.6 million members, 65,000 volunteers, as well as lots of people who eat in our cafes, shop on our website or on property, buy secondhand books, drink in our pubs. So lots and lots of big numbers. And part of the reason for showing this slide is just to give you a flavour, just really for the breadth of data that we have to manage and try and get insight from at the National Trust. It's really diverse, whether that's kind of customer data, transaction data, finance information, whether that's species habitat data, soil erosion data, geospatial mapping information. It's really broad. Next slide, please, Sarah. And historically, getting access to that data, being able to understand it and interpret it to take meaningful evidence-based actions was really frustrating. And so back in 2018, many people in the organisation were frustrated, is a polite word for it. There were lots of swear words, if I'm honest, around kind of the lack of confidence that people had in our management information, or MI. There's lots of confusion about who to go to get what done. And if you build the next transition, Sarah, and most of our analyst communities, we have a fairly hub and spoke model for analysis. Lots of those communities were using different tools, weren't operating together collectively in an integrated way. And they were telling me specifically, that they didn't feel empowered to do their jobs. The central team that Sarah managed and that I managed as well, was just inundated with demands for new reports, new dashboards, new analysis. People just couldn't get access to the information they needed to make whatever decision they were trying to do in a timely way. And you'll see on the next couple of slides, our users couldn't interpret the data that we were sharing. We were just dumping data at them in crosstabs, and it was really difficult for them to even understand from what was being made available to them, what the insight was and what action they could take on the back of that. So if you jump onto the next slide, Sarah, we've got a few screenshots really of what some of the dashboards used to look like in our legacy platforms. And we had 5 different data visualization tools. So this is one of our reports that we used to have. This is a sales report, I think. So it's recording by property what we've sold in any given time period. And you can imagine how difficult is that for a retail manager, an area manager, a merchandiser to understand what our top sellers are and what they need to get more stock in or not. It's just impossible. And the next one is an example of our visitor reporting. So this is for a given property over a week, the number of visitors that they had, whether it was paid, member visits, school visits, what the conversion rate was in terms of converting payers to members. It's just a really long horizontal table with horrible scrolling to get the information you needed, just horrible. Not everything was like that though. On the next slide, we some of our systems were a bit more sophisticated. We still had lots of tables, but we did at some point move to color coding, so we could rag status some of the boxes and some of the cells to give people an indication about where they needed to focus. The problem was we just ragged everything, so it was just a sea of reds or seas of greens, and everyone was still confused about what they needed to do. We did start getting to graphs, so but one of the go back to the other one, Sarah. One of the things I wanted to point out in this one was there were 15 different tabs that we were expecting users to go through just to understand the feedback that they were getting on their property. The data in this chart is around customer service and the experience that visitors were having at our places, and we expected our visitor experience teams to go through 15 different tabs every week to understand how they're performing and what actions they needed to take to improve performance. It's just very difficult. But one of the tools that we had, next slide please, was Tableau. We've been using that in our customer insight team since 2016, 2015. And so we had made some attempts to present information, present data in a more intuitive way, in a way that is simpler to understand and in a way that is easier for end users to interpret so that they know what action they can take on the back of that. And the little chart on the left hand side there is meant to be a map. It doesn't look like that's copied properly. Still not brilliant, still not perfect visualization, still lots and lots of opportunities that I imagine you guys are already screaming at the screens for to say that we could have done better, but it was a step change at that time in terms of what we could do. And so what we decided we knew we could do better. We knew we could do better. So what Sarah and I did on the next slide was to create a program of work to firstly just really better empower our analysts in the various business teams that we had to do their jobs, just to do their jobs, and help support and train them to be more confident and more data literate in terms of the best ways to present and share information so that it's more easier for an end user to interpret what's happening. We formally moved to a hub and spoke model for analytics, which meant that we have a small centre of excellence, which is managed by Sarah. And then we have embedded analysts in lots of different parts of our business, whether that be finance, HR, strategy and performance, commercial teams. And that gives those people the tools to do more self-service, really. And it moves the analysis much closer to where action is taken. We've done quite a lot of work with end users just to empower and enable them to better interpret and argue with data and to know more about what they can do with that data. We've got 4,000 end users of our solution, so that in itself was a massive challenge. And I mentioned we had 5 different data visualization tools 2 years ago. We've rationalized that down and standardized now on Tableau as our enterprise-wide tool. So what I'm going to do now is hand over to Sarah, who will talk a bit more about what we actually did.
So we won't talk about everything we did. We'll probably be here for a long time. But one of the key principles that we employed is this: test and learn to industrialize. So we had a program of work which lasted about 18 months, and now we're into more of an ongoing operational sort of process. And this is one of the key principles we employed throughout. So throughout the program of work, the change we very much focused on figuring out what were the key use cases that were either painful or had big value, or just people couldn't get the answers today to the questions and decisions they needed to make. And we worked on those first, so figuring out what they were, building a dashboard or whatever we needed to kind of help that particular issue or pain point, and then we test it. And we did this very collaboratively with the kind of end users of that dashboard, and iterated it and changed as we went through the program with them. So that's on the left hand side. So in terms of the program, we used it very much as almost like a prototyping sort of approach, and then we moved to for the things that we knew we needed to keep and they needed to be used by a lot of people for a kind of a long period of time. Then we moved into kind of an industrialize or productionize phase, which really meant taking what we'd done, maybe applying some more standards to it, making it a bit more robust maybe in terms of how we were putting the data in, and making sure that it was really consistent as well, so that when we had our about 4,000 users kind of looking at the different visualizations en masse, then they would start to see something that was very consistent, and they could figure out where they needed to go to do what. So nowadays we tend to use the left hand side, the test and learn, really for anything that's an ad hoc, so an ad hoc question that needs some analysis, and maybe one of our analysts that Rich was talking about who are out in the business, maybe they just do a one-off thing where they build a dashboard to answer a question and that's done. We also use it for kind of figuring out what the requirements are sort of perspective. And either that ad hoc analysis, just we leave it, we don't do anything with it, or if we figure out there's a bigger need, then we'll take it through the process on the right hand side. So that's one of the kind of general principles that we always use when we're creating new dashboards. So what I want to do is just show you really quickly a few of the visualizations that were created during the project. So we've got a great team of analysts and a great team of visualizers, and I'm just showing off some of their work here. But so this is really a small handful of the different dashboards that we have, and I'm going to go through them fairly quickly. But you can see straight away this is much crisper than the previous ones that Rich was sharing. We've moved to a flexible template, so that it uses all of the National Trust branding and colours. We have the standard kind of banner at the top with the eye, and the eye is where users can get any information about that particular dashboard anywhere, anything they need to get help, any supporting documentation. This one I'm showing here is about some of our key measurements around land and nature status by region. I've blocked out some of the things there so that we don't show all the detail, but that's kind of one. This one is about our visitors. So how many people are visiting the properties and the places by region. Easy to see the trends, and also easy to see how, if you're a general manager, for instance, how you are, probably be an area manager, how you are trending against your budget or against the previous year. So you can see that really quickly at a glance. One thing I would also point out on here is we were really careful with the colour palette. So you see the kind of pinky colour and the green. We were really careful to make sure all the colours were accessible, especially for colourblind people. So that's why we have this kind of lovely pink shade rather than red and the green, because that's easily visible. This is the part of the visitor experience survey, the new version that Rich was showing earlier. So you see again, quite crisp, easy to understand what the key areas are that you need to work on. And all of these have filters either at the top or down the side, where you can start to look at the information by maybe the trust as a whole, or as a region, or as an area, or even as an individual property. So actually these are starting to cut down the time that our users, so they could be general managers, they could be visitor experience managers, the amount of time they have to spend going and looking at all the information and figuring out actually, okay, what do I need to do with this? So this cuts that out to a certain extent. Another one here is about around a particular property. What's the density of the membership around that property, so that we can look to see, are there any opportunities for growth potentially, and also kind of what is the membership base around the property that kind of we need to look after. And this is a new refresh version using the template of the other one that Rich showed previously. So you can see there's a kind of common theme across all of these dashboards now. So we had quite a few benefits from the program that we ran. So in terms of efficiency and time savings, we estimate we've, in terms of efficiencies, saved about £1 million worth of time every year in terms of our people's kind of working hour. We've improved decision making as well. The number of calls that we get through our help desk around quality of data and issues has been reduced by 91%, which is kind of a huge change. And then lastly, but maybe most importantly, is actually having the Tableau in place, along with all the processes that we put in place, and also the access to the data sets that now our analysts have across the business, has really enabled us to respond much quicker to any requests that we might have for new analysis. So in particular, at the start of the coronavirus kind of crisis, we needed to bring up more dashboards around our new booking system, and also around our membership kind of retention. So I think it's safe to say, without these tools, and we also use Ultrix as well, so that's a key part, we wouldn't have been able to respond as quickly as we have. And on the right here are just some of the quotes we've had from our users. Very positive. There are some niggles, but there aren't that many. But in general, most of our users enjoy the Tableau experience compared to what we had previously in our old, more tabular sort of dashboards. So we've got our foundations in place. We're not done yet, and we're certainly not perfect. And what we want to do now is really build on what we have and start to get more value from it. And one of the ways we're going to do that is to start bringing together all of those kind of almost disparate data sets that we have together, so we can move on to another step. So Rich showed you the kind of the old legacy reports we had. We moved to something that's much easier to interpret and to take action on. And what we're doing next is we're looking at how can we start to bring all of that good stuff together a little bit more, and start to tell stories with the data we have. And I'm showing here on the right something that was created by one of our analysts called Paul Hunt with a team of other people, actually, a multidisciplinary team. And what they did was start to look at, what does a general manager at a property, what do they need to know about the audience that's near them, so their customers, and how can they make the experience better for them, and how can they start to make decisions about what they might do on a day-to-day basis. And what this does is bring together a collection of data from lots of different sources. So the visitor stats that I showed you earlier, also what we know about the segmentation of our customers, demographics around the properties, and also the visitor experience scores and surveys that we showed you earlier. And then also we were able to bring in qualitative research data as well and blend them all together. So we built this as a story, and the intention being that the view would go kind of left to right. There's some education in here as well, explaining a little bit about what the information means. And if I just showed you just quickly a couple of things. So this is our visitor view. So you probably look at it by your individual property, and then it shows you both what's your member penetration like and what is the split of your visitors. So who's visited, what types of visitors have you had, how many were members over the past period of time. And you can also select how close they live to you. So are they within 30 minutes, 60 minutes? So you can get an idea of what the people around your place look like. And the green area on the right is I've kind of made this general, but actually what there is in there is some specific text based on the information, the data there. And we have a little algorithm that runs in the background that gives a recommendation for, okay, this is what you could potentially do. It's always offering suggestions, not a kind of definite tell. Okay, given your visitor profile, this is what are the sorts of things that you could start to do. One of the areas there we look at is what motivates people to visit, and again that comes from a different data source, and this will vary from each place slightly, and again there may be some slightly different recommendations on the right there, and I thought I had another screenshot in that anyway. So that is something we have under prototype, and we're finding is quite a nice way of starting to tie together all of the information that we have. And what we're trying to do with this is again take a step further in reducing the amount of time that our people need to spend analysing data and figuring out what to do with it. So just in general, reflections over the last 18 months, 2 years, what's worked really well for us is we've had small, you might call them squads, you might call them agile teams, made up of people from lines of business, from IT, from our BI teams and our data science teams, and also our insight research teams, and working together with a very definite short target and using those agile kind of approaches has worked really well. Also encouraging our analysts to share things before they're absolutely perfect, which is sometimes hard, has worked really well. And then getting like user involvement so that we can early on change something if it's not working quite right. And we had a really good partnership with the information labs, and we've had data school placements throughout the time, and that has really helped us to up our game in general in terms of the quality of the visualizations we're able to do, and understanding kind of industry best practice. And what could we have done differently? Probably quite a few things, but a couple of things here are we did a big migration from the legacy systems to the new Tableau, and we did cut down quite a lot of the content that we brought across. In retrospect, I think we probably could have been a bit tougher with that, and probably made some harder choices and not brought as much across as we did. So that's one thing that we do differently. And then the last one there is trying to demonstrate some value quite early on for everybody in the different kind of levels in the organisation, so that you're making sure you're getting the right level of support across the piece. So we did that pretty well in some areas, and a lot of areas, but not all. So given time again, that's what I do, is just get that stakeholder map out and think, right, okay, who's this? What's this person getting from what we're delivering? And really look for the pain points that the key people in the organisation have, and make sure that you're delivering some value for them. And that's it. So thank you for listening to us. Our details are on there if you want to contact us on LinkedIn. Do we have any questions?
Hiya, I've got a question.
Hello.
Hiya, thanks very much, Sarah and Rich. That was really interesting. My name's Kaylee. I'm an analyst at Wood for Trees, and we're a charity consultant. And I'm quite interested to know what's your opinion on the idea of sort of democratizing data. So is it the case that everyone in the team has access to all these different reports, or do you keep it quite locked down to specific teams having access to specific reports?
Yeah, good question. So we have some core things that we consider are kind of needed by everybody at the trust, and well, at least everybody who has access to Tableau would need. So we have an area that we call the hub within our Tableau site, and everybody has access to that. But we do have other areas that are really specific to the different departments. So finance, conservation, performance, insight, and they all have their own areas, and that is locked down specifically to them. So that's the way we manage that that balancing act. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Could I jump in? Actually, can I just say hello to Kaylee? Because I used to work with Kaylee at Wood for Trees, so I just wanted to wave.
You're rich.
Hey, Kaylee. Matt's on here as well. Really great presentation, thank you. I think what I liked a lot about the output that you've got is the visual consistency that you've achieved. So I'm going to give you a subtext to this. We don't have a style guide where I work, and it's bloody chaos, if I'm being honest. We'd really like to bring one in. So my question is for you, you've got that visual consistency going on across the dashboards. Have you got a style guide? And did you get any pushback from your developers on having to follow some kind of rules?
So we have got a style guide. It offers some flexibility. So there was some a little bit of reticence from areas, but not all, because one of the things that we did with this project was there were analysts in different groups who were just using Excel and they were going mad, and they were desperate for some sort of tooling. So actually bringing them onto the project and them having Tableau to use, and then we had an academy, a centre of excellence as well for them, so training and all that kind of stuff, community. I think they were just really so pleased to be able to initially to use those tools that there wasn't that much pushback, and then also the team would have took those guidelines to the little community and got them to kind of feed into it as well to a certain extent. But there is some flexibility in that template, not in terms of the colours and what have you, but a little bit in terms of style, because we don't want to take away the creativity completely from people.
Yeah, that's my concern. So they had input into the style guide itself, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a collaborative exercise that we went through to design the style guide.
That's really useful.
No,
So
your style guide is great. It's fantastic. I've got to say we've got the same sort of idea at Lloyds, where we're trying to build that style guide in, where you've got consistent colours, etc. But you leave that blank space in the middle as pure creativity. So it sounds like you're doing quite similar to us. It's nice to hear.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions for Sarah or Rich? I'm sure if you do have any other questions that pop into your head, put them in the chat. I'm sure we have some time at the end as well. What we're going to move on to is Rich Speigal up at the top of, well, he's up at the top of my screen. I don't know if he's at the top of your screen, and Matt Williams. So Richard's from NatWest. Matt is from Lloyds and works in my team.
You just said NatWest.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't work for that capitalist outfit. I work for the Nationwide Building
Nationwide.
Society.
Oh God, sorry. I'm getting confused with my banks and building societies now. Too many of them on this call. And actually, a lot of what you talked about in that last presentation, Sarah and Rich, really resonated, I think, with what Matt and Rich are getting behind, is that whole getting insight is kind of the key for data and really being able to get the value out of your data. And so they're going to present a brand new idea they've had. So I'll hand over. I don't want to take any of the glory. Over to Matt and Rich.
Could I just get a thumbs up if the screen share is working? Is everybody getting that?
Yeah, all good.
Right. Okay, we're going to go through this. It's something really quick, I guess, to run by you. It's more a question than a presentation. The end of generalists is, we called it that. It's partly a poke at BI job listings. So sorry, Alex, in advance. But it's also an idea that we've got to formalise some skills that we think the Tableau community are probably already very good at as it goes. Just first up, a couple of intros. I'm Richard. I work for the Nationwide Building Society. That's me on the left looking a little
Sorry.
I work in the BI Solutions team. So it's our job to basically build dashboards for the Nationwide all day long. I spent 10 years in analytics and about 15 as a software engineer with some crossover. I'm not that old. And I'm joined by Matt.
Rich, yeah, as Pippa said, work at Lloyds Banking Group as a data specialist, worked at both startups and a data agency, actually with Kaylee, who just had a question before this. So yeah, come across my share of postings and that sort of thing, which kind of led to this presentation.
So I'll lead you in. Let's start with the real basics and just remind ourselves what our jobs really are. Organisations ask us questions. I think that's fairly obvious. I think it's our job to give them evidence-based answers and try and steer them away from gut. I'd hope it's obvious that we want the answers to be digestible. They aren't always. I think we've all seen enough eye rolling amongst decision makers at at an analytics presentation to know that it doesn't always land. And the final thing, certainly it's a mantra for us, is that the output that we produce does need to be actionable. Businesses aren't asking us questions for fun. So the way we get there, let's just tease this out, because this is a diagram that we use a lot, called the Analytical U-bend, and it describes pretty well the process on, well, certainly every project I've ever worked on, and it helps us keep a sense of perspective when projects get difficult. Hopefully the process is one that you all recognise. We all have to go start by finding data, which is clearly never straightforward. I'm sure you've all suffered the bruises there. Then we analyse it, we go hunting for patterns and relationships, and we hope to end up with some insight. We don't always. Ultimately a collection of interesting facts, but I think it's important to note that insight isn't the end for us. We don't consider that the answer until we can properly communicate it and set it in some kind of business context. And I think that's where things get really, really tough. We draw it as a U-bend because the bottom part is really, really hard. That whole zone is filled with very complex processes. There's always a lot of compromises and there's always a lot of grey areas, but it isn't what the business wants. The business wants simple, they want digestible, they want actionable. And transitioning back out of that U-bend is most often, I think, where projects live or die, really. And that bit's down to communication. I think in a BI setting, our best communication tool is good design. I think in analytics, where the output might be more static, that requires more storytelling skills. It might require some public speaking skills. And in my experience, at least, these aren't skills that everybody in a BI team is comfortable with. So I'm going to hand you back to Matt, who's going to take you through some typical roles that we have in a large BI team and hopefully highlight a very obvious problem.
Good, Rich. So first up, we got the product owner. So bigly involved end to end in the project. So each question and the initial kind of project handshake, and then back in the delivery stage. However, they do not tend to have that much technical or analytical skills. So that kind of moves us on to the business analyst. So a lot of big organizations do use BAs. And so again, they're heavily involved in the initial project handshake. and refining the business question, that type of thing. But on the same line as the POs, they generally don't have a great amount of kind of technical or data knowledge. They also aren't involved in the answer, the presentation. So it's quite easy for them to overpromise, as they don't kind of suffer the consequences. And then you have kind of the more data specific roles. So you've got the data engineer, you know, based on postings, etc. Probably most defined role in data from a bunch of internal, external sources, and then through crazy wizardry into tables that make sense. And then we've noticed the good ones will also run number checks, do some lightweight analysis to make sure everything looked right. And then they pass it over to the unicorn, or also known as a data analyst or a BI developer. So these folks is, I think we think it starts getting really interesting. Based on the typical job posting, data analysts need to have a kind of a full stack. You know, they need to know back-end data stuff, do the analysis and the insight, and then take all of those kind of, as Rich phrases it, the U-bend skills, and then put them together for the answer and the presentation. So that is just a crazy wide scope of skills that are needed. So that kind of got us thinking about how this generalist role can be defined.
I think given the broadness of the ask, it's pretty likely that in a lot of teams, but certainly our team, we do split the roles according to people's strengths. You know, Sally will write SQL, Dave will do design. But I think the problem that we've got is because we don't formally split the role, it makes hiring much harder. Job listings in this space often ask people to be good at absolutely everything on paper. We all know that's completely impossible. Everybody has a strengths and weakness, but I suppose that leaves us in a spot where often we don't really know somebody's skills until they actually start in the role. So we had this idea for creating this kind of new role. Matt.
Yeah, so the term or the job title we came up with was insight experience, and just to preface, this was made up on the pub pre-lockdown. We were a few pints deep when we came up with this, but it has stuck as of now. So kind of run through what IEXA would do. So would be involved initially in the question phase. So, you know, get a real understanding of what the business or what the end user really needs, rather than hearing that hearsay from the BA or the product owner. Then kind of move on to what's potentially the most important phase or part of a project, and realistically what kind of a data team gets paid for, which is translating the really difficult bottom of U-bend stuff into something that pretty much anyone, even your kind of senior C-level exec, understand relatively easily. So just to note as well that still be engineers and data analysts, because we're splitting this role out further, so we don't really see the need for sort of those heavy data or analytical skills, because you'd be working alongside engineers and data analysts. So realistically, it's the design, data viz, the storytelling, and really kind of conveying the importance and the insight that you found in a project.
So a bit of background on where we plucked this insight experience word from. I'll just give you a bit of background. This is my completely made up chart of the last 70 years of computing. I'm a little bit older probably than some of you on the call, and this at least is how I'll remember it. I think the turning point was in 2007 when the iPhone launched, and as a personal back history, I was doing web development back then. And professionally, it was a massive moment. Small touch screens just changed everything, and we had to make really big adjustments to how we were designing user interfaces. And an interesting thing happened, because technical people like me stopped designing the output. User experience appeared in our vocabulary, new front-end roles started to appear, and ultimately devices since then have got simpler to use. My mum's got one in her handbag. I suppose what we're asking for, I think analytics as a community needs this user experience moment. As an industry, we're not wholeheartedly brilliant at output. So I guess what we're asking for is, should we stop hiring unicorns and formally split the role? and give pros the chance, absolute communication professionals, the chance to take charge of output. So I'll hand back to Matt, because I think Tableau's already doing this actually really, really well.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Tableau, we believe, is already filled with IXs. Looking through sort of Makeover Mondays, Viz, or any of the other kind of hashtags that are used across the board. There's a ton of people designing amazing looking dashboards with specific insight and story in mind, which is realistically what an insight experience is about. And so pulled out a couple of people for this presentation. These are mostly based on the fact that they've written blog posts kind of detailing how they go about building out these dashboards and these vises. So the first up is Lindsay Betzendahl. So I'm sure many of you are aware, Lindsay specialises in healthcare viz, and she started up the hashtag Project Healthcare. So one of my favourite blog posts that she wrote was about mindful vising and creating ways of sort of connecting data, the people, and the story. I think one of the things that she really conveyed is that in her area, she had to go through a much different thought process. Thinking about sort of e-commerce, where one data point might be someone's kind of behaviour in the checkout phase. Healthcare, it's, it can be operation wait times, it can be essentially life or death situations. So reading through her process and how she connects the data, and even like these huge data, aggregated data sets, she really needs to be quite careful and considerate about what she's kind of communicating. And I think that process is encompasses what IX is for us. And there's the second person is Andy Carnival. I'm sure, again, many of you have read his blog posts. I'm pretty sure he's helped me with a ton of stuff when I've been stuck at work. So there's one of his blog posts that he did back in like 2015 or something on actionable sparklines. And so a lot of what he used in this blog post is actually quite old tech. I think it was pre-level of detail calculations. But it was the process that he to understand the users, like the end user's needs, and the process that he went through to get there. And he worked so hard, went through so many different kind of iterations of a calculation, get those little kind of coloured blobs on the end of a sparkline. But at the end of the day, this is exactly what the user wanted. And just again, this really sums up what IX is in a nutshell.
So that brings us to the end. Before we'll open up to questions, obviously, but we've thrown this up here as a little teaser. It's a little job posting that we shared. We have a little WhatsApp group for Viz. It's a little job posting that we were giggling about a few weeks ago. And if you unpick this really dense text, it says here that the successful, BI data analyst, insight analyst, it's got all the words in the job title. It said that a successful candidate is going to have to know not one, but two, but three BI tools. So they're going to be a data engineer, a statistical polymath, a visualization pro, and all that with 18 months experience. And we found it kind of funny. So I'd like to kind of throw it out to the floor. Are we on to something here? Should we formalize this? And actually, can I just pick on Alex and say, what do you think of that job posting? I'll stop now.
I did wonder as soon as you cracked that first thing whether that was you finished that off.
Is that one of yours, isn't it?
No. Actually, I'm a little bit smug because that's well, it's just not one of mine, not one of IO's. So yeah, no, I think it's absolutely something that should be pushed. It just it makes a lot more sense once you've kind of laid out those kind of key differences and ultimately what value it would bring to have those separate roles and have people really kind of specialize in that versus, like you said, trying to have people who apparently need, like you said, those three different tools plus X, Y, and Z with 18 months experience. You just don't find those people. So yeah, impossible. Absolutely worthwhile doing.
Richard?
Sure.
Hi, it's Gary here. I'd say this is the way that the story that you described really resonates for me, because this is how we set up the the MI function at Carnival the last few years ago, where we split the skills to back end data skills and then front end data visualization skills, because it is such a broad range of skills. And we took that specialism route, and it was a really good thing to do. It really worked for us.
That's useful to hear. Can I just ask you, what were the job titles that you sort of allocated people? Just so
from so I had within the team, I two people that were, one was a data manager, an infrastructure manager that looked after the Tableau server and the data coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have 3 analysts at the front end, so a reporting manager, and then 2 just data analysts, or visualization analysts, I think we called them, underneath. But yeah, it allowed us to, naturally the 2 sides, the data part of the project and the visualization part of the project, they run at different paces, right? So often if you've got a really big data project, you want someone focused on that and dedicated on that. And you still want to have people there that have got the agileness to be able to respond to customer demands on doing dashboards. So it allowed us to be able to move on both doing big projects where we've got a data side and still offering a customer service for dashboards at exactly the same time. So it allowed us a lot of flexibility.
That's really encouraging. I suppose when I asked, did you hire with those job titles sort of defined?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was deliberate.
Yeah,
it was deliberate, because when I took over the team, it was in 2017. It was as you described. Everyone was trying to do everything. So what we ended up doing was a not great job of everything. So it was a question of saying, no, we need to make this specialisms, and it's data is a specialism and visualization is a specialism, and there are overlaps, of course there are within them, absolutely, but keeping them as specialisms for us really helped.
That's brilliant. That's really heartening to hear. Is there any other questions?
Just to follow on that, we did a similar thing at the National Trust as well. So the way that we're organised is we kind of have a back-end data management team of data engineers. We've got a set of data product owners. Essentially, we're organised a bit like a digital team. So we've got product owners who work really collaboratively with our data platform team. We've got a BI team, which Sarah talked about. And then we have an insight team. They came out of more of a traditional market research type function, but they're providing some of that kind of capability that you described. So they're the real storyteller part of our organisation. They're integrating data from tons of different sources, including BI, but also lots of other sources. They're business partners with our end stakeholders and almost internal consultants helping them make evidence-based decisions.
Just out of interest, how likely is it among that team for anybody to have formal design training? I suppose I'm looking for this line between the analyst, somebody who's very numerate, and somebody who's completely output focused and has the formal training behind them.
You can get them. You have to ask for it. So where we weren't asking for it, not unsurprisingly, we weren't getting it. What we found is if you put insight in the title, you tend to get a lot of market research type people. I think that's just because they've rebranded themselves insight professionals. But if you're really clear in terms of the job description that you want, like design thinking expertise, that kind of stuff, you can get that. And we not only have recruited for that, but we've trained internally those people with those skills as well. So we had a piece of work last year where we got a design thinking practitioner in a train the trainer kind of way to then train the insight leads, as well as some of our BI practitioners. There's one of the frustrations we found is that the data analysts and BI people don't always want to be in the middle between the data engineers and the insight people doing all of the stakeholder communication. They want to be doing that as well. So it does vary on a person-to-person basis, but we found that if people want to do that, we can empower them to do that, definitely.
That's interesting. So this is already happening, you'd say? Sorry, Phil.
I was just going to say that one thing that we did have at Lloyds, actually, in our team, we used to have somebody called a data journalist. And I think this is where you're starting to get into that space. I think a data journalist is kind of another name for an IX designer, where we had somebody who sat in our team who just worked across the advanced analytics department. She worked everywhere, trying to pull out the interesting stories that cut across everything people were doing. So if there was a mortgages project going on in different spaces, she'd go and talk to all of those projects and try and join all the dots and tell the real overarching story. And she was using Illustrator, Tableau, and really focused on how to communicate the story and how to visualize that in a really eye-catching way. And I think that was very successful.
That sounds exactly what we were thinking with IX. I like that name. Can we steal that?
Yeah, go ahead. But I think data journalism is going to become bigger and bigger. I mean, obviously, The Economist does a fantastic job of it as an example.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But I think that's going to become the next way that businesses start communicating data, rather than these big dashboards, which we are still doing a lot of. But I think it's going to become like almost a news feed of what should I be interested in and thinking about today.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, thank you. I'll take that as a thumbs up then.
No, really interesting concept. Thank you.
Absolutely, and I think one of the attendees, Chris, just mentioned, perhaps from another perspective, just perhaps as someone looking for that next opportunity, next team to join, it's saying, well, okay, what are the employers' sort of priorities? So if they're asking for that kind of ridiculous combination of skills, it can almost have the adverse effect of putting people off. So making sure that perhaps people are very honest and specific about their vision for those types of positions is going to be massive for them finding the right people.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree.
Hey, thanks, Rich and Matt. Just to sort of follow on from that, Alex, I can sort of 100% resonate with that. Being kind of still, I'd say, young in terms of employment, the amount of like job applications that I was scrolling through a couple of years ago thinking, oh my God, well, I've got some experience in kind of these broad areas, but you want, many programming languages, lots of software experience, and you think, oh God, it's totally put me off applying. I wonder how many other people have just thought this sounds almost too complex for kind of an entry-level job, really.
Absolutely, and it's an education piece, not only perhaps from an employer's perspective, but even say partnering with agents in these instances where the education needs to be not just with perhaps the people creating the roles. It's actually having people push back and sort of say, actually, what are your genuine priorities for the position, or is it just a shopping list that you want to go through? Because like I said, otherwise it can be a very off-putting proposition. So where perhaps you see a few things on there that just aren't quite what you've got to offer, so people don't, but yet you could be perfect for the team, for the role. So yeah, 100% agree.
I'm really glad you said that, actually, Kaylee, because I think probably the people that this is unfairest on are people looking for entry-level jobs. I mean, I'll just give it as a grey hair. I'm just going to tell you now, it is okay to not know everything. We all don't know everything. And I think these are quite poisonous, a lot of these job adverts, to be honest, because I do think it leaves you with an impression of you're just never good enough with an advert like that. And it's wrong. It's never going to get people onto the ladder in the analytics community if they think the bar is that high. It's unrealistic, and it's not the real world, as we've heard. Everybody said, we do specialise. So hopefully take some heart from that.
Yeah, definitely. And Kaylee, if I can give you any word of advice as well, is that my best hires have always been people who haven't got the right software skills. It's more about the attitude and wanting to learn. So no, I think it's great, the presentation. Thank you for that.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, really enjoyed that. Thanks very much.
Lovely. Okay, cool. In which case we'll move on to Gary. Gary is the Director of Finance Systems at Carnival UK, and he's got some interesting insights to share with us.
Great, thanks, Alex. Right, just make sure. Can you see my screen now? Okay.
Yeah, all good.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks very much for having me today, Southwest Tug. Really appreciate it. So in this session, I'm just going to cover off a tool that I've created over the last few months, and I've got it sat in my Tableau public profile, which I've called Finance Reimagined. It's something that I initially created for my own use, but one that I've put out there for the data visualization community, because I thought it might be able to help other people as well. And it's really a tool to kind of help people in the finance community that don't really know much or anything about data visualization, what it can do for them, to kind of give them an idea of where they can go and what they can use Tableau for. And equally, I've put it out there for the data visualization community that may be looking to influence their finance colleagues and might get some use cases out of it that may well resonate with the finance community. So before I jump into the tool, though, just to give you a bit of a background about me, because I'm sure many of you won't know who I am. So by day, top left-hand corner, I do have a background in accounting, so I am an accountant. I will admit that. I've also, over the last 20 years, sort of done a number of roles within finance, so accounting roles, analyst roles, business partnering roles, FP&A roles. I've spent some time out in retail operations and strategy and supply chain as well. So I've had a really varied background in what I do, and I've been really lucky to do that across some great brands. So with Pizza Hut, B&Q, and most recently with Carnival UK. So for those of you who don't know Carnival UK, we run part of the Carnival Corporation, and we run the P&O and Cunard cruise line brands in the UK. So we've got 9 ships in the UK which should be sailing, but at the moment they're just parked up at either Weymouth or Bournemouth, unfortunately, but we'll get back sailing shortly, hopefully, once COVID allows us to. So my role there, Director of Finance Systems. So I look after lots of different systems, Oracle systems, Cognos, various planning systems, and one of those is also Tableau. So 3 years ago, as part of my team within there, because I also looked after the management information team, I looked after Tableau and took it from a proof of concept up now to we've managed to scale up to kind of 300 users across the organisation, across 5 different countries. So a really great opportunity to be involved in. Unfortunately, within my role, I do spend more time in PowerPoint than I do in any system or do anything creative. And when I saw Tableau a few years ago, and we started using it and implementing it, with the background that I've got within finance and operations, it absolutely resonated with me immediately around the difference that it could make. If I'd have had that when I was younger, I'd have been able to do far better things within my job. So really for me, kind of Tableau really started to transcend into kind of my personal life, and I got the specialist and associate qualifications, and I'm looking at doing the professional soon, because I just want to know as much as I can about it. And it's really kind of moved me into the data community out there. So I am on Twitter if anyone wants to connect, at Gary Collins 24. And also on my Tableau public profile, I've got a number of things that I like to kind of play with and do. I put the Viz on the right hand side there for some of my for some of the people in the National Trust, because that was one I did recently about protecting our global heritage. But yeah, it's for me, it's something that's kind of been a really great journey over the last kind of few years. And so sort of coming back to kind of Finance Reimagined and kind of what was my inspiration for kind of doing this and creating this tool. I've done 4 different presentations now as a customer success story for Tableau, specifically in the finance communities and at finance events, because I know it's something that Tableau is very keen to kind of get involved with in the finance community. And the reception has always been generally really positive within the finance community. People are often asking questions about, how did we get started? What difference can it really make? What efficiencies can we gain? What benefits did we get? And particularly when you're in those sorts of environments, the presentation environments, you can explain it to people, you can put it up on slides and tell the story. But for those people that have never seen data visualization, seen Tableau and really know what it can do, it's quite difficult to kind of connect with what the tool can do. So, I mean, the quote for me from Ben Franklin, I think, sort of sums it all up really, that says, tell me and I'll forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I will learn. and I really wanted to have something that enabled other people to be involved with this learning. And after I'd done a presentation, to give them a tool that they could go off and play with in their own time. So that's really kind of what I wanted to do. And so what I've done is to kind of create effectively what for me is a ready-made presentation with use cases in that I can use to immediately support with any conversations that I have, both inside and outside of my organization. So what I've got, and I've just sort of run it through here, it's basically a series of dashboards and use cases. So I've got 20 visualizations, which I've based off of Superstore, but ones that I think are really valuable and can be valuable to explain to people in the finance community about how data visualization can kind of help them. So I've really directed it really towards the finance community and the things that I see that they can kind of have help with. So what I'm going to do is just take you through a few of those now, probably 3 or 4 of them, just to give you an idea of the sorts of things that I was thinking behind it. Again, if anyone is here with a finance kind of background thinking, how can data visualization help me, or anyone in the data visualization community that thinks what would resonate with someone in finance, hopefully this can kind of help you. So the first one, which I've got within the workbook, which I said is available on Tableau Public, so please have a look if this resonates with you, is really around kind of variances. So, you know, in finance, we look at variances a lot. So, you know, we'll often have plans, forecasts, targets, which we're constantly comparing performance to. Now, what you often find within the finance community, and particularly within our training as accountants, the way that we analyse those variances is generally to try and find what the drivers are between volume, mix, and price. So we will try and break everything out to volume, mix, and price. And this for us sometimes can be quite tricky to do. And often when you try and do this in Excel, and you have a model that works to it, and you want to be able to roll the data around in various ways, the model can get quite big and kind of quite chunky and become quite unwieldy. So what I've got here is an example of how that can kind of, I see that this can work for a finance community, where in this example, again, this is also Superstore sales. I'm looking here at kind of, imagine this is my current year sales. This might be a comparative sales, whether it be prior year, whether it be a target, whatever it may well be, and then putting yourselves in the respective buckets of what's driving my movement between volume, mix, and price. So again, as an example of how this can work, the way that I see it, something that for us in finance is really important is understanding how are those variances moving between different years within your performance. Really critical. The ability to then use sheet swapping within Tableau to suddenly look really quickly about at a good level of information about where I am versus everybody versus the various categories. So can I start to see insight immediately? And then moving sort of forward again, having more ways that you can sort of drill into this by looking at things at subcategories, really trying to then see, oh, look, I found that I've got a variance here within my technology and my consumer section. That will immediately allow me to know the conversations that I need to have as a finance analyst. Particularly if I was going into a trading meeting, I'd immediately know that I've got an issue there because all of my price variance is being offset by volume. So something's not working right within that part of the business. The pricing strategy probably isn't working right. So being able to get to that really quickly, for me, will be a massive win for finance. An equivalent version of this volume, mix, and price analysis that I've got in here, we've moved over into Tableau in the last year at Carnival, and that was a process which we only generally did once a month because it was quite big and unwieldy. We've now brought it into Tableau, and that's now automated and updated every single day. So it allows people much greater insight into understanding these variances and gives finance the ability to kind of go back out into the business and kind of challenge in a way that we hadn't been able to do before. So for me, this is a real kind of big win from a finance point of view. Moving on as well to another area that I sort of see as a big opportunity for finance, and it's really the power of Tableau around using level of detail calculations to appraise kind of business cases and business case assumptions. So what you will often have in finance, you know, the organisation will look to finance to create an objective view of business cases as they get created, which means us being able to go off and looking at our own data and forming that objective view. So when the business case is appraised at the executive committee, they've got an independent view of it within the organisation. So this is a backbone of what we often have to do in finance. So, you know, if you imagine the scenario on the left-hand side, you know, that's a fairly simple bar chart of just order volumes by year through different segments. You know, and as a finance person, you may well have a marketeer come to you and say, you know, I'm going to grow my volumes by 50% next year, and I'm going to go and ask the investment committee for £500,000 of investment to do it. And I think I'm going to do that by attracting new people into the business. So as a finance person, you'd have to go off and kind of say, well, do we think that those assumptions are realistic? Do we really think we're going to get that return on that money? And for me, the level of detail calculations is a really, really powerful tool to be able to really look at the organisation in slightly different ways than your standard reporting would do. So as an example, on the right-hand side there, you know, I've just overlaid, you know, a level of detail calculation over exactly the same chart that says to me, well, when did customers first order? What does our profile look like, really? So where is our revenue coming from? Is it new customers, or is it from existing or old customers? And that would immediately tell me that the majority of the revenue that we've got today is coming from our 2016 base. So we've got very, very loyal customers. So that would be the challenge that you'd put back as part of that business case, is to say, you know, what's going to be different with the marketing campaigns to be able to make sure that we do get a return on that investment, because most of our growth is coming from customers who are pre-existing, not coming from new customers. So it gives finance that chance to be able to ask much more pointed questions to the situation at hand, rather than kind of being quite generalist about it, and really making sure that there's much more integrity and rigor to the business cases that kind of go forward. So for me, this is where, you know, the power of Tableau and some of the functionality within level of detail calculations to be able to draw that out is really powerful. You know, if I'd have had this capability back in my days when I was an analyst at Pizza Hut, when we were looking at menu constructs to try and work out how many people who buy a pizza also buy a starter or buy a dessert, this would have taken weeks and months off of the amount of work that I needed to do as a finance analyst there. So moving forward to another one that I think, again, can have real value for finance community, connected scatter plots. So, you know, particularly if you work in an operations finance team and you work with the operations teams, you know, there's two things you generally know about the guys: A, they're competitive, and B, they haven't got a lot of time because of everything that kind of gets thrown at them. So being able to visualize really, really quickly for those sorts of communities what's going on at a high level is absolutely critical. And in, you know, retail environments particularly, you know, your relationship between sales and profit ratio or margin is absolutely key, looking at that, but also looking at that over time. And that can quickly build into actually quite a big data set that you're trying to work with. So trying to give operators the clearest and simplest view of that, for me, will makes a massive difference. So in this example, you know, being able to kind of drill in, being able to look at particular months of in this case, you know, your trends, being able to go and say, I'm going to look at this weekly. Have I got an issue with my performance? I can see there that the central region's got the biggest disparity on their profit ratio performance versus all of the other regions. So my question would be, what's going on there? How have we got such a big difference in going on in that region? Again, it would be the sort of information going into a trading meeting that I'd immediately want to be able to quickly have a look at. I can compare into prior year. Is this something that we saw in the prior year or not? And it immediately sets you up for a different conversation, but also that operator for a different conversation, to be able to understand kind of what's going on for them and being able to compare to their peers in a really, really visual and really, really fast way. The last one that I'm just going to show you is just where I see Tableau can really benefit stock loss departments. So for those of you that don't know, stock loss departments in finance are there to to really kind of find all the ways that profit's leaking from the organisation. Now, that may well come in the form of fraudulent activity, either through customers or staff, or it may also come through bad processes and doing things in a really inefficient way. So they have a really wide remit. And if you work in the stock loss department, you know, for them, the devil really is in the detail. When you're trying to see particular things and particular patterns at the absolute micro level, again, they are into absolute minutiae of detail. And in my time in finance, I've seen Excel models that stock loss departments run to do this that are absolutely vast, and they start them running on a Monday morning, and you know, it'll be 3 hours later they're still sort of waiting for the ability to kind of have a look at that sort of data. And for me, being able to kind of use, you know, being able to use sort of scatter plots where you've got the ability to choose, you know, X and Y analyses, you choose your analysis within the middle, being able to then have a look at particular regional splits, being able to highlight really into the detail, in this instance, of particular customers maybe. Have you got any particular trends that you might see that they're doing things that might look slightly unorthodox? Really can save them an absolute bunch of time from kind of where they are now. The faster that they can get into this detail and make sense of it for an organisation, that can generally mean more profit because we can understand the issues that are out there and kind of deal with them. I've got many examples within the workbook, but I just wanted to kind of share a few with you here now. So I'll probably draw to a close there and see if there's any questions.
It's Matt here from the earlier presentation. Quick question. So a lot of what we get at Lloyds, you'll put in a huge amount of effort to build out a really nice dashboard like you've done there, and then you get the inevitable, how can I export this data to Excel? Have you found a way to combat that, or I mean, has this made a big difference to how that question's been asked?
Yeah, that's a great question. Do we still get that question? Yeah, we absolutely do. So we haven't stopped people from downloading to Excel, although we could. We haven't stopped it. What we try and do at Carnival is kind of, before anyone just says, yeah, can I have the data? I try and say, well, what's the question? I don't just want to give you data. What's the question that you're seeking to solve? And let's try and work on it together and try and give you solutions to it. You know, different parts of the organisation for us work in quite different ways. So from finance, we support every department with Tableau. Sales teams, it's really easy to work with. You know, if you can make their lives easier, they'll generally take it. The finance community can be a little bit harder because they generally like to kind of build it themselves. So you do need to kind of break down those barriers about confidence in the reporting, confidence in the analytics. But it takes time. It takes time.
Nice one, and great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have we got any other questions for Gary?
I can resonate everything what Gary has said, because I also work in the finance department, and all the variance and charts, everything, it's similar, which we also do. And all the three presentations were very, very good. One of the key questions that I'll be asking is the second presentation where, sorry, who did it? Richard and Matt, right? So he had a question that whether all the roles can be clubbed together to do a more specific tool. In my experience, what I have found that the customers, they want to know instantly whatever is their question, to simplify the things and the answer. And Tableau is very, very good in presenting that in a visually appealing report. And so, but what happens is that the analysts are so passionate about presenting reports in Tableau that they give too many charts, and in a way the customers get distracted from their actual question. So many times it happens that the story is not present, the story is not very clear cut. So it should start from a question and to an answer, that's it. But analysts, we are always so passionate that, oh, Tableau can do this and that. And so reports after reports we keep producing.
That is so true.
People get distracted, to be honest with you. And it just requires a very simple chart, visually appealing, and basically it should be telling a story. So what's the end product? What is the end result? That's what the customers want to know, so that they can have a better decision about it.
I totally resonates with me. I know when I first got a BI tool, actually I presented a few times, and I walked into my boss one morning with yet another dashboard, and his words were, he said, oh, bloody hell, Richard, he said, not another bloody bar chart. And I was just, he just cut me in half. And, but he was right. And I learned as the lesson sort of fairly quickly that, you know, you need to work hard on output and you need to simplify. It's really easy for an analyst, you know, down in the weeds to overcomplicate and want to start throwing everything at a user. And it's really common for them to get overwhelmed. I can give you a practical rule, certainly that we use at Nationwide. In fact, it's part of our peer review process before we put a dashboard into production. And one of the rules, you can Wikipedia this now, I've just looked it up. We call it the 7+or-2 rule. It's actually called the magical number rule. And it's the idea of what a human can cognitively kind of process visually. And there's this idea that people can really only process 7 things on a page, ±2. And we use that to count the number of chart objects or KPIs that we've got on a page. And if we find it's starting to move outside of those bounds, if there's more KPIs or chart objects on a page than that sort of magical mix, we start to ask questions: have we overcomplicated this? Are people going to get it? And it's a good practical day-to-day rule just to push back on analysts and just ask them to check themselves a little bit. Have you really simplified this properly, or is there a better way to boil it down?
Yeah. And heard a nice thing from Pippa. I didn't know about data journalism. To be honest, that was completely new for me. Can you elaborate anything about it? What is it?
Yeah, I suppose data journalism has been happening for a long time across many media outlets. So The Economist is a fantastic example. If you go onto The Economist website, and they've got a part called it's data, let me dig it out. It's try and dig out the right name so I can direct you to the right part. It's called, sorry, you're watching me search the web now. So if you go onto the Economist website, if you search on the top panel, they've got a fantastic example when my web page loads. Oh, my laptop's decided to give up on me now. But they've got a section which is purely dedicated to simple, really clear data stories. And if you want to learn about data journalism, I think that is a fantastic place to go. They've also got the data visualization vocabulary. I think that's a fantastic place to start learning about kind of using the right charts to tell the story. it's about kind of that infographics and grasping the audience and getting people to want to engage in the data, and kind of the emotive story, I think, is where data journalism really succeeds.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Was there any other questions?
I've got a quick question.
There we go.
Hi,
Perfect
sorry,
timing.
this is my name's Lee Weaver. I work in Hansard, and it's actually for Richard. It's the continuation of that 7+2. In respect, you mentioned obviously how many visuals, but do you include like the pop-up vizzes as part of that 7+2?
I wouldn't include a pop-up. No, I think it's about first impression. So there's a little design trick. It's the trick that artists use actually. It's called the squint test, and it's the idea of the squint test. You take your design, you sit back from it, and you squint, and what you should see is just a lot of blurs. But the things that dominate your visualization should be the things that you see while you're squinting, and all the detail will sort of disappear. And it's when we do the squint test that we decide whether or not we're breaking that 7+ or -2 rule. So, I mean, a pop-up you're not going to see unless you interact with something. Pop-ups, hovers, tooltips, they're a good way of helping people uncover detail. They're an exploratory tool, but you know, I wouldn't count them unless I can see them the moment that the dashboard or the viz first appears. It's that first impression moment. What you're looking for in a user, the best impression, do you know when you know you've nailed it, is when a user sits and looks at something for the first time, and the first thing they say is, oh my God, aren't we doing great on sales? Or, oh my God, the northern region's not doing very well. If they're talking about the insight straight away, then you know you've got the squint test and the 7+ or -2 rule right, because they've understood quickly. If they start saying, what's that chart on the left? And how's it play with the one on the right? You've probably got too much going on. So that's kind of what I'm listening for. So yeah, it's definitely a first impression thing.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I've finally made my internet catch up with my head, and so the Economist section is called graphic detail, if anybody wants to look at that. Is there any other questions for, I suppose, anyone on the call? If not, I suppose, Alex, I'm assuming this recording we can send out as long as all the speakers are happy?
Yep.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we'll be able to send out the recording in case you want to share it anywhere. Thank you all so much for dialing in to the Southwest England Virtual Tug. If you've got any suggestions for content, or you want to bring anything to another session, please get in touch with either me or Alex. I think we've got our contact details on the sign up page. But it was really nice to see all your faces tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for hosting, guys. That was great. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you very much,
Thanks
everyone.
to all the speakers. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.